How are you feeling? You got John Riggs here. This is interesting. Oftentimes when I do these panels, I like to hack video games. It's one of the things I like to show too, and I've done that before. I think to the point where some of the organizers at the Expo, and I love, this is the Portland Retro Gaming Expo, so of course it's one of the best, and they're like, in a very polite way, they're like, could you do like something else? Because I've done it before, and I was like, well, sometimes you've seen that before maybe, or if you've been on my panels before, that's fine too. So I was like, well, I could talk, I don't know, I mean, I could talk about anything. It's, I'm a radio DJ for 21 years, I can talk about anything. So I said, well, I could probably talk about how, I'm releasing video games and I have zero coding experience. Like, yeah, that's good enough, that's good enough. So we'll talk about that briefly. We will open up for Q&A as well. So if you have any questions about the games I make, or about if you have any ideas, or even just about, myself, my YouTube channel, anything like that, happy to take all those questions too at the end. One thing I'm going to do though is, we're here for about 45 minutes. So for the next 35 to 40 minutes, I want to tell you about this exciting NFT opportunity. That's going to help you. No, we're not doing that today? A friend of mine named Stuart is literally flying in from New Jersey to the Portland Retro Gaming Expo. He does this about every year when he can. And he's like, I'm going to try to make it to your panel. I'm going to try to get it into the very end. Because he's flying into New Jersey. He's landing at like 11:30, and he's going to zoom over here. He knows I'm here until about noon. So if I see Stuart come in through the back, and I say something like, ladies and gentlemen, here's Stuart, whatever the case is, applaud like he's a rock star. Like he's the coolest thing ever, and we're just going to completely troll him when he comes in. So if I happen to say that, just keep that in mind later. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, but I think it'll be hilarious, and I'll try to film it too. Great guy, but it'll just be kind of funny just to have him come through. So if I say, like ladies and gentlemen, here's Stuart, like he's like, oh my god, he's like as if Scott the Woz came through or something like that. That'd be kind of funny. So let's just talk about what the thing actually told me to talk about. I could talk about anything all day. So I have this game called Yeah Yeah Beavis 2, which I made for the NES. It's for sale, of course it is. I'm not encouraging you to buy it or anything. I do have a table though. And it was one of those ideas where, because, especially growing up with NES and growing up with video games, everybody has their game in their mind of like the best game of all time. It's like somebody should make this game, or we need to make this game. And that's kind of how I got started into making game hacks, which I did for years and years, even before YouTube, before I started doing YouTube videos. Which that started, again, going back to Adventure Time, playing that on the ukulele. It started with, I was watching Adventure Time, and I was like, you know what? And my kids were watching it too, but I was really watching it for me. But I was watching Adventure Time, and I was like, oh god, here's this boy with this anamorphic, anthropomorphic dog. And I was thinking, that's a lot like a Boy and His Blob. So on the internet, I was like, oh, somebody should make a Boy and His Blob hack of Adventure Time. Or the other way around. Somebody should make a hack of Boy and His Blob and turn it into Adventure Time. And the internet being the internet, and I wish I would have screen capped it, or I wish I would have saved it, because it was the best thing ever. Somebody responded with, why don't you do it? I was like, oh yeah, why don't I do it? Because I've seen, and especially if you're into Nintendo hacks, and if you've seen the ROM lists and like the Naked Mario Brothers, or it's Mario 2, but it's the characters from Kiss. There's some really terrible hacks out there, but people are doing it apparently. So I was like, I could probably figure out how to do that. And there was limited resources on the internet at the time, but just enough for me to kind of poke around, play around, kind of figure it out on how that came to be. And that's kind of how I got started originally. Was I could do pixel art okay. The good thing with Nintendo games is it's 8-bit. You have to use your imagination a lot. You don't really think about it, but Castlevania, Simon Belmont from Castlevania, you think about that game, you're like, oh, the graphics are cool, so cool and everything. Simon Belmont's face is like 2 pixels, and that's it. The rest is just the graphics, and your brain makes up the rest. So that's kind of how that came to be. To this day, I still haven't done a Boy and His Blob hack of Adventure Time. I probably should, just to get it over with. But that's kind of how I got started, and then went from there. And then I kind of had a YouTube channel, and then I was on Metal Jesus' channel and stuff like that. And then I was like, I don't want Nintendo to come after me. That I always hear about Nintendo coming after people. So I was like, well, if I make my own video game, make my own homebrews, I could do that. But again, I didn't know how. I didn't have any coding experience. I didn't go to school for any of this stuff. I knew nothing about hex editing outside of hacking video games, which does use hex editing. But I knew nothing about how to do any of that until I started doing my thing and I did my own videos on how to do that. So then I found other people who could, though, and I had a friend. We had a friend, Brandon, when I lived in Casper, Wyoming. He was a French culinary trained chef, and happened to work at the same radio station as I did, because everybody has a side hustle. And he told, and it was the best analogy, not even pertaining to this, but he told me, because he could bake really well, and I'm terrible at baking, because baking is like a science, it's an alchemy, precise. And I'm just like, just put a bunch of stuff in a pan, and that looks good enough, sure. That's my philosophy. But he mentioned that, and he was like, you don't have to know how to bake to be a good cook or to be a good chef. Where he came from, he was like, you could be the best saucier, the person who makes the best sauces. You don't even know how to turn on an oven. You don't even know how to pour cereal. But if you make the best sauces, you'll have a career for life. And I was like, that's kind of true. And I thought about that. And he's also in a band too, and I thought about that too. And again, growing up playing the ukulele or playing the piano, I don't know how to play the drums. Doesn't mean I can't be a member of a band. So it's like, well, I can do pixel art. Doesn't mean I know how to code. And then fortunately, that's when I came to the guys from Megacat Studios. And they've been here before. Been a long time though. I'm friends with James though from Megacat Studios. I don't know if you watch my channel. I just recently did a video where he hiked his video game collection at his wall. The same guy. And he runs Megacat Studios. And he made a homebrew once upon a time a while back. I was like, well, I know how to hack video games. I can do that. And I've done that for years. I've done wedding proposals. I've done, I put the characters from Bob's Burgers into Burger Time just for fun. Things like that. So I reached out to James saying, look, I figure if I can hack a homebrew, then I'm in the clear, and I'm away from Nintendo, and they're off, again, I'm trying to play nice before I get a cease and desist, which I still haven't had to this day, fortunately, fingers crossed. So I was like, if I can hack a homebrew, then that kind of counts, because someone else already did the coding, the music's already there, but I can change the graphics, or I can even have placeholders and put my own graphics in there. So that's when I reached out to James at Megacat Studios, and I said, look, I know you did a homebrew, which he did for one of the expos in Pittsburgh, which is their home office. 40 copies, sold it for charity. Only very few who were into homebrew NES games at the time even know of this game, heard of this game. It's called Germ Squashers. Again, too many people know about it. And I said, I know you have to have this ROM. Actually, don't even worry about that. I have the game. I can dump my own ROMs. I have a ROM dumper. With your permission, can I just basically buy the ROM so I can hack it and make my own game? And that way it's like, it's my game, but it was coded by someone else. And that's when James at Megacat Studios said, you've always helped us out. A lot of people with YouTube channels don't talk about indie games. They don't talk about homebrews. It's not, they want to talk about Fortnite. They want to talk about Minecraft, the new Nintendo stuff, the new, all the Switch 2 rumors every day that changes. That's what draws the views. That's what gets the clicks. I'm a fan. So I know I'm not going to get as many views, but I always love what these indie companies are doing. I love seeing the Pig Squad out here. Love seeing those guys every year. And that's when James was like, you know what, you've always helped us out, you've always covered our videos when no one else would. We will just code you a game from scratch, and this one will be on us. And to do that, to actually pay for a company, which you can do if you have like $50,000, whatever it is, to pay for their staff, basically, to work on this game after hours, on their own time, when Megacat Studios is releasing like WrestleQuest, and they have like 20 games in their pipeline right now. Several of them are super popular IPs. I'll let them announce those when the time comes. We'll do that for you just for fun. And I said, thanks. Because that's what someone does. That's what you say when somebody goes out of the way and does all this work for you that you don't have to pay for. But it's like, that was their way of saying thank you for helping us out. And that's when Yeah Yeah Beavis 2 came about. Does anybody know the story of Yeah Yeah Beavis 1? I'll cover the footnotes really quickly. Yeah Yeah Beavis 1 doesn't exist. It's lost. It's considered lost media. You can do the research online if you'd like. Yeah Yeah Beavis 1 was listed in the back of magazines in the buy, sell, and trade section, like 88, 89. You would see it on there from one of the companies. I don't remember which one. I don't think it was Funko Land. It was something. And it became lost media. Now, some people think it was a badly translated game because a lot of games came from Japan to the United States. Maybe they couldn't quite translate it, so they're like, it kind of sounds like Yeah Yeah Beavis 1 after you translate it. What I think is more appropriate, and what I think probably happened was it was a ringer. So if someone else copied and pasted their list onto theirs, they could go back to them saying, you stole our list because that game doesn't exist. But either way, Yeah Yeah Beavis 1 doesn't exist. So I was like, wouldn't it be funny if it did? And we made it. And the game was in development already before I even thought of that. Like, we were already starting to work on, like, because the game itself, it actually plays just like Germ Squashers. That's where he's like, well, I'll just recreate Germ Squashers, so it's separate from that. That's an old thing, but we can do better than that and just better mechanics. And that's where Yeah Yeah Beavis 2 came about. It was actually originally going to be called Yeah Yeah Beavis 1 until speaking to, I mean, he's here this week, and Frank Cifaldi for the Video Game History Foundation. I respect his opinion. And I was like, what if I did this? What do you think? And he said, you can, however, I gotta tell you this story. This is a true story. There was another Nintendo prototype, it was listed in magazines and everything. It was called Bioforce Ape. I don't know if anyone's heard of that one, but you play as this genetically engineered ape that does wrestling moves and stuff like that. It was in magazines. There was gonna be a Nintendo game, it never came out. So somebody, not sure who it was, but somebody mocked up a homebrew, basically, made from scratch, and said, "Oh, look, I found it. Here it is." And it looked just like the Nintendo game, because you saw the pictures and they could recreate the graphics and everything. So they made kind of this mock-up game of like, "Hey, I found a prototype. Here it is." Well, about a year later, the actual prototype was found, proving the other guy was a fraud. So I was like, "Well, I want to do that, just in case." I mean, I'm sure this game doesn't exist, but it's like, just in case, you know what? It would be funnier to call it Yeah Yeah Beavis 2 to be the sequel to the game that doesn't exist. So they did the coding, I can do the graphics, but then it comes down to, well, it's gotta have a soundtrack. Fortunately, there's another YouTube channel called Chips and Cellos, and they do chiptune versions of classical music. And me working in radio, the good news with classical music is it is public domain, you don't have to pay for it. So I was like, well, you already did the work, because all of their YouTube videos are done through Family Tracker, which is how you compose music for Nintendo games. So it was easy for them to translate that into the, again, like through emulation, you can do whatever you want. But to make it fit onto a Nintendo cartridge, it can only be so big in size and everything. So they had to, convert a couple of them so it worked. So it turned out great. So I can take care of the graphics, they can do the music, Megacat Studio is doing the coding for it. And then I was like, just put in placeholders. You can even just copy and paste old assets for that Germ Squashers, whatever, that's fine. And then they said, okay, well, let's put in some random graphics, but the game's gonna be yours, you can do whatever you want with it, it'll be fine, they're super cool about that. And then they showed me a screenshot in progress, and I was like, oh, I like those graphics. So now at this point, the thing I was gonna do, I didn't have to touch much, because I was like, can I just use those instead? So here it is now, we have a game, we have a soundtrack, it's only 10 levels at the time, and I've touched maybe 3% of it. And they're like, no, it's your game, it's your game. I'm like, I feel like I haven't even touched it. I mean, it's like, I don't know if it's imposter syndrome, but it's like, I feel like I've not even really done much to this game yet, except for kind of orchestrating and putting it all together. And you can do that too. You can be the producer. I mean, Justin Silverman is here with RetroWare, and he's kind of the executive producer of RetroWare. He's making all these great games. Is he making these great games? He's kind of telling people what to do, I guess. I guess that might be part of it too. But I did go in and change some of the graphics, so like instead of one thing, it's another thing. I added a couple of things as well. And then, because I'm a huge fan of box art, the game had to have box art too. So the box art itself is from, you probably don't know, he's done a couple of conventions. His name's, ironically, his name's Yoshi, which is hilarious. But his name's Yoshi, and it's funny, he does CGI work for Star Wars, for Mandalorian. I mean, there's scenes in Star Wars Episode 6, I think also Episode 9, Mandalorian, a bunch of other TV shows. He's working on, what was he working on recently? Invincibles 2, or Invincibles 2. But he's a huge fan too. So you find all these people who are like, kind of in the industry. They do these cool things. Megacat Studios, you can consider them as well too. But Yoshi does all these great things, but he's a fan. He's an old school retro collector, so he's always wanted to be part of a Nintendo project himself, but just never knew how to get into it. I was like, well, I'm doing this. I mean, if you want to draw the box art, I'd love you if you could. So he did. So at the end of the day, I have this game for the last, ever since the games have been out for about a year and a half, 2 years, where it's like, hey, it's my game, it's me, this is the Rigg'd Game version, this is called Yeah Yeah Beavis 2, and Rigg'd Game, it's funny, my last name is literally Riggs. I couldn't come up with a better last name than that, because I literally rig video games. I have this game and it's mine. And it's probably, you know, my contribution to this, the actual game, the actual thing that you play, you put it in your cartridge, it's on Switch, it's on Steam. You know, just because it's cheaper to do, I can put it on Dreamcast. I have it on Game Boy Advance. That one's sold out. I probably put about 3% effort into this game because everyone else did the work. I did the play testing, I did the bug testing, but again, getting the bands together. And again, when they gave me the game, they're like, here's the game, congratulations, good luck, here it is. And I was like, well, I don't want to go back and say, you know, could you change this one thing to this other thing? I wouldn't do that. But fortunately, I have another friend of mine who also hacks video games, but he knows much more about coding than I do. And so he was able to go in and change it from 10 levels to 100 levels. And I was just like, thank you for that. So instead of it being like a 15-minute experience, it now takes a couple hours to beat or go through from there. So yeah, Beavis too. And so at the end of the day, I got this thing and I got it in the mail, and I can program my own cartridges for physical cartridges, and I can hack the games. And I also wanted a game that was 2 players simultaneous, because when I was hacking video games, some people would be like, can you, hey, on the download, can you put me in Super Mario Brothers, but put me as Mario and put my wife as Luigi? I was like, well, they use the same graphics. Like, you change one, you change both, you know. But I wanted a game that had 2 different graphics, so I could change both of them for that reason. Which I've done with the same game. So it's a homebrew. I can sell it legally, and then I can also change the graphics because I can. And then, you know, like if you happen to have this game on Switch, I think it's on sale right now during one of those Halloween, you know, spooky sales or whatever. At the title screen, if you type in the Konami code on the Switch version, you play as me and my wife, as player 1 and player 2. And there's a couple of other codes in there too that are just like, you know, because I can. And I can also put those on physical cartridges, which I have in the past too. Which is kind of the story of, you know, again, what started out as it'd be cool to do this one thing. And then it was like, I did this thing. And I was like, wait a minute, I actually have a published Nintendo game. You know, Super Trip, when you actually see like the Nintendo trailer with the little Switch thing at the very beginning, that goes into the game that you worked on for, you know, the last long time. I was like, oh shoot, this is actually kind of real. And I was like, now that I think about it, I didn't really do much to it, but I didn't have to, because, you know, it was a team effort. A lot of people are using NES Maker, used S Maker. A lot of people are making great games with that, and anybody can learn that. I have a copy of it. I haven't made any games with it. But they have such refined tutorials and a huge community of people with NES Maker. I wish they were here this weekend so I could chat about. Where they have people who can help you with music, they can help you with graphics, they can help you with fine-tuning coding, where it's like, this game takes place on the moon, so I need more moon gravity jumps instead of just the default thing. Ladies and gentlemen, Stuart. I wish I was recording. I was actually thinking about recording that, but I was like, I knew it was going to come in just a little bit too. And then the same idea with, and I don't really have just a random cartridge, but Gleamy the Cube, which turned into, I just wanted to make a game where you play as a gelatinous cube. And that's what it turned into, another idea where somebody had a homebrew, like I tried to do with Yeah Beavis too, but someone else had a homebrew that was just kind of sitting there. It's there, but, you know, not a whole lot of people know about it, but I like it. So I was like, hey, can I just buy that ROM and hack it and be my own thing? And I'll still give you shout out, I'll still give you credit as the coding person. And it was nice working with them, because they were just like, do whatever you want, just send us a copy when you're done. So I was like, okay, I can do that. Yeah. So there is another version of that, but but that one you play as a cube versus the other one, bless you, versus playing as a qubit. Well, you do something like that. So again, that's kind of the crash course thing that was like, hey, talk about something you haven't talked about. So I did that, and because I'm a fast talker, that took about 20 minutes. So now, we have, it didn't take that long, I promise, but actually it took about 20 minutes. Funny that. But we can certainly open up for Q&A. If you have any questions, go for it. Oh, I remember you asked yesterday, right?
I have 2.
What do you got?
First is where I saw it, but I completely lost where your table was. Where can I go to buy it? And the second one is, how did the Dreamcast version come to be?
Oh, good question. Where the booth spaces turned into single tables, there's like a little bit of that open area right between like the major booths and the where the Blockbuster Championship is and the lounge area. I'm right in between. I just have a single table out there. The Dreamcast came to be, and this one, I think it's a great story. You'll probably be like, that's the dumbest story ever. I'm sorry I asked. Was I had the NES version. And then I had another friend of mine who can put NES games on Dreamcast through emulation. They have the emulator that you can put on there. Especially if you've ever done Dreamcast emulation, you can have like, oh, here's like, the 600 and whatever games as a Dreamcast disc. But if you have just one game on that disc through the emulator, you can have it self-boot, so when you pop it in, it's just the only game that plays. So I had a friend of mine, just through Instagram, who has done that before in the past, and he was like, oh, I can put your game on Dreamcast. I was like, well, hey, if you want to do that, my work's already done. So it's like, if you want to do all the work and I get half the money, I'm cool with that. That's fine by me. So he made about 20 copies originally of the game on Dreamcast. What I didn't expect, and then we did that, and then I posted about it, he posted about it, and I brought a couple of them to conventions, and it kind of sat there, and it's oh cool, yeah, whatever. Because that's the other thing too, is not everyone has an NES or even a Dreamcast, but not everyone has that. So it's like, oh, it's cool to have it on other platforms in case. What I didn't expect was how big the Dreamcast homebrew community is, and that's what blew my mind, because I knew there's a bunch of people making independent games on Dreamcast. Because Dreamcast is it's a Windows machine, so it's like, thank you for having it easy to hack and everything. There's a company called Wave Studios. There's a company called Wave Studios in the UK, and they reached out to me saying, whoa, wait. You made a Dreamcast game and we didn't know about it? I was like, well, nobody knew about it. I just put it out there. I mean, it's just, it's a brand new thing. And that's when Wave Studios themselves reached out and said, that's when they started asking all the bigger questions, where it's like, well, who's your distributor? What's the price on this? What's the cut on this? So it's like, it's me and some dude who lives in like Yuma, Arizona or something like that, who made 20 copies of the game, and that was that. And that was supposed to be pretty much all there was to it. But that's when they reached out and said, and they're like, so it's not a hack or anything? So they knew who I was for hacking video games, but didn't know I actually did it, a homebrew game and made it, completely from scratch. And I was like, yeah. And they're like, can we distribute the game and then we can sell it on our site, and then you get a cut of the proceeds. And I was like, again, I already did all the work. So if you want to do all the work and I get all the money, I'm okay with that. And they said, fine. And then what happened, and then I linked to them too, so it's like, hey, do you want to buy the Dreamcast version? They're in the UK, so there's like the blue label version, this one's a black label version, whatever. And it sold pretty well to the point where, and they're very happy with it. And I was like, oh, that's cool. But it's, again, when you deal with someone else and then they're taking all the money, you're also like, remember that thing that you said about me getting some money out of this? That whole time? And I forgot what they told me. They said, because they said, well, here's the thing, and we'll split, here's the split of the cost or whatever, and I got them the lion's share, but they did, again, the cost of making Dreamcast games is much cheaper than making Nintendo games or anything with circuit boards, as you know. And that's when they turned around and said, you know what, I'll tell you what, consider this, just hear me out. Okay. We owe you this much money. It wasn't like actually making and publishing and finally getting video games out there. You're not getting rich off it. It's just for fun, and it's a hobby. It's a fun thing to do, and it's cool to put yourself out there. It's cool for you to say, oh, I have a game on Switch, whatever. But they said, okay, we owe you this much money. I forgot how much it was. It was like just over $1,000. They said, we can send that to you right now, or let me just throw this out there. Can we still sell the game on our site? And then kind of in return, we will send you like 500 copies of the game for you to sell at conventions or online yourself, and you can do whatever you want with it. And I said, sure. So that's, so now I have, a bunch of these games for the next, several conventions, whatever they make. So instead of getting like a piece of the profits, then I get all the profits from the games I make and I was like, I didn't think that the game would sell, a bunch anyway, but it's doing fine. And it's like, was that a good deal or bad deal? I don't know. But I'm happy with it because it gives me because that was the other idea was, well, if you make the game, can I just buy the games from you? Can I buy my own game from you at cost? And then I can sell them at conventions. And this way I just already have the games ready to roll. So again, when it comes to when you actually have a game out there, that's when you can start. And then there's people who do that with movies too. They might even have a finished project. They start pitching it to all these companies saying, hey, do you want to publish? The game's already developed. Now it comes down to like looking for a publisher. So for the Dreamcast version, it's Wave. For the NES version, it's me. So I'm self-publishing my own games and everything. But there's people who can do that, and that's how the Dreamcast game came about. And then it's also kind of how the Game Boy Advance game came about, because again, there's an emulator that you can make it self-executable on a Game Boy Advance card. And there are people, I haven't done this yet, but there are people who will literally buy all of the big booty Pokemon. I mean, all those really these random hacks that they have on these Game Boy Advance flashcards. But with the flasher, you can reprogram into something else. So they're buying all these cheap, I mean, like they're like $3 each or something, $5 each Game Boy Advance games, and then just erase the old game and put their own game on there, and then sell that on the cheap too. So a lot of other options out there too. I don't know, it's insane. Too much stuff. Go for it.
How do you go about like reaching out to a lot of the people that you're talking to about all this stuff, especially when you haven't like, especially if it's somebody who like you haven't worked with yet, or you haven't like, you didn't like have any like prior contact with them or anything like that?
Yeah, no, it's all relationship building, and it takes that first initial stepping out, and it's hard to like, it's hard to. As a typical dude, I don't like to read. Like, if you give me like a birthday card, I'm just like, oh, words, seriously. So sometimes when you get those emails, I try to send emails the way I like to receive them. And I have certainly received emails that are just block of text, and I'd reply saying, that's a whole lot of words. What's the footnote version, you know? But you know, just concise and to the point, or maybe oftentimes you might even have friends in common that you didn't even know. So I try to look for those too. But reaching out to, again, it helped because I already knew the guy at Megacat Studios. I already knew, you know, the chips and cellos for the music and all that. Wave Studios was my first time meeting them, or that was my introduction to them, was them reaching out to me saying, like, oh, we do Dreamcast games too, and here's a bunch of games. And I was looking at it, I was like, oh, I actually have several of these. So I'm very familiar with what you do. I just didn't know they had a name or anything. I was just, you know, didn't know about that. But you know, I know who they are now. But it just takes, I mean, it's literally just that kind of reaching out saying, hey, we do this too, and we're looking for a publisher or something like that, you know. Especially if you kind of attach it to something I don't know, not something they've heard of, but something like you know, or like what's the other enticing thing? Because there's so many. That's the other thing too, especially with indie games that just, I mean, they're not making the big money like these AAA titles are. But you know, but if you have the accessibility of like, oh, and we also, you know, we're also a game store. So you know, and so we also want to sell the store in house, and you know, that's, you know, maybe that could kind of sweeten the deal somehow. You know, but yeah, it's a tough question. But for me, I mean, I don't mind cold calling either. I just, you know, drop a message or try to hit them up on all the social media things and do what I can.
I ask because it's something where I'm like, I'm trying to like do all of this. I also do art, but like I'm going it alone, and I'm like, I don't know how to like friggin' find everybody else, or at least like contact them.
Yeah. Well, and conventions are great for that, because sometimes they'll have like Pigs here, or like Midwest Gaming Classic has an entire like indie homebrew section, and then it's just chatting with them, and then you'll find out, you know, that's how I found out someone else who, yes, he has his own game, but his expertise is music. So yes, he has his own game, but then he also provides the soundtrack for like 5 other games. You know, or there's someone who does the like the box art, you know, or somebody who just do boxes. There's somebody who I've seen him before a few times. He hit me up yesterday, and he has that's kind of his expertise is like, maybe you have the box art, but you know, yeah, you don't have, you know, not everyone has a box printer, I guess. So that's where he comes in, where it's like, hey, I can actually make the box for you, or I can print the manuals for you, so they're professional grade instead of just, you know, rental style, you know, staple in the middle kind of whatever you have. I don't know. Yeah, it's just it's that networking. Just, you know, find out who's doing it too, and become their best friend. That works for me. And candy helps. Yes. Go ahead.
Hey, so you were saying about making games, and you mentioned the NES Maker.
Right.
What is it that you use to code games? Are you using like text files? I'm completely oblivious.
Oh no.
So if I was to start doing it from the beginning, what way would you sort of say?
Sure.
Start?
Yeah, I use email to tell James at Megacat Studios to code because I don't do the coding. Again, and usually when I do my panel, I do a panel on how to hack NES games or Nintendo games, or NES games if you're in the UK. On yourself. We have, no, I mean, and I have tutorials on my YouTube channel too on how to do that too, so if you missed out on that, that's fine too. But no, I mean, there are programs out there. There's a ton of free programs out there, and the best part is they're free, of how to open up Nintendo games kind of from the back end, and you know, even playing around with changing the graphics or the colors or the text. There is a way to kind of change the music. I haven't quite got. I've seen how to do it. That's a little bit outside of my realm of expertise. I know people can do it though. Yeah, but I mean, NES Maker is great for that because NES Maker takes care of everything. even from the easy tutorials, which kind of show you here's how to make a maze game, here's how to make a platformer, here's how to make something else, and then it has a little bit more advanced. Okay, well now you can go in and all the things that we take for granted playing video games, where it's like, yes, hold the D button to go right, but then you also have to tell us to stop going right when you don't hold the D button, instead of, or so things like that, where it's like I never even thought about that. You have to, every precise movement, for those that come into play. But there's some tutorials online. It's one of the reasons I started my YouTube channel, was because they're so tech oriented. When it comes to things like that, where it's just go through the assembly code, or when it came to fixing games for open cart surgery, they're just like, all you have to do, why would you do that? All you have to do is solder the A29 to the 3. I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Just I need layman's terms, slot A into side B kind of thing. Go ahead.
I'm currently in a class here at Portland Community College all about video games. I think
Nice.
John Hancock used to teach it.
Yeah.
Right now we're using GDevelop to code our games, and I don't know if you have any experience with that, but also we're using Pixscale for the pixel art.
Okay.
Are there any pixel programs that you like, or any places you like to go to get palettes and stuff like that?
Yeah, there is. I don't remember the name off the top of my head. The game I'm working on currently, they have, I don't know if it's the industry standard, and I forgot what it's called, is the honest answer. I looked at it once, I used it once for the game that we're working on, and I was like, that works well. And it may have been that pixel one that you were just talking about, because it's already built for just the Nintendo limitations for, because every game is made up of 8x8 pixel blocks, and only 4 colors. Well, there's 4 colors, there's 3 colors, and then one's the transparency. But there's and then you can do hit detection, which is another story. But the G one that you just mentioned, I hadn't heard of that one yet, so I should look into that one. A lot of times, all the hex editing I've ever done has just been through the FCEUX Nintendo emulator, where you can just open up the hex and you can just literally change the code on the fly and go from there. But yeah, again, all the stuff I do on my end, it's probably super archaic, but works for me. It's what I'm used to. Go for it.
Once you've produced or edited the ROM, how do you go about, what's the process to get it onto the physical cartridge?
I used to, it was a sad time in my life. I used to destroy old video games and rip out the ROMs and then use those circuit boards to put new ROMs on there. I have an EEPROM programmer, I pop them on there. Nintendo had their kind of loosey-goosey system where it's it won't work if you put it on there, but you can rewire it so it would. And I used to do that for a long time, but now they have flash boards that are just, if you know what type of circuit board it uses. Nintendo games and Genesis games and Super Nintendo games all have their kind of own way of doing it. But the bigger NES games like Mario 3 and all that will use a certain type of circuit board with a certain MMC3 chip, they call it, that can do special things that earlier games couldn't. But when you know what kind of what they call it, a mapper, I suppose. But when you know what kind of circuit board it takes, they have they have these flash boards and they have a flash programmer, and you literally just pop the board in there and say, put this ROM on this, and it's what I use now too. It's what I use currently. So I could also pop if I took my Beavis game, which has the default characters, the Jangshi in there, but wanted to put the version of myself on there, I could put that game back in there and say, erase that one and put this other game on the same circuit board. And a lot of games use kind of the same, the same circuit boards. There's a few different options. And also depending on if I need a battery or not. But they have flash boards out there. There's a few sources. I use ones from Retro Stage. Retro Stage is in Canada. You've never heard of her. They have, they're in Canada, but the shipping, it ships to you pretty quickly. And they do Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Genesis, Game Boy Advance, TurboGrafx 16 now, Nintendo 64 even, to put some of the 64 hacks on there. But I just use flash boards. It's more money up front, but it's just, you can whip up so many more than soldering all the pins that I used to do. That took forever. Got a couple more minutes. Anything? Yeah, go for it.
And so do they also provide the shell?
They do. Yeah, and they provide, not a huge selection, but they do provide shells. The shells are Nintendo grade. There are other sites out there like AliExpress, which I'm sure Temu probably has them too. The plastic feels kind of cheap, but there's with, I don't know how they even got a hold of them, but they're there's the Nintendo stamps for these shells, which is why you see them in all these different colors. So you don't just need federal neutrality green or gray, but you can have, blue or black or transparent or gold or bronze or silver. There's people who have I don't even know how they're making them, but they have they're made out of wood, literal, which I'm sure was an actual carving something or other. That's probably not a stamp. But, yeah, it could be laser etching and all that. And there's a lot of options out there. But the retro stage does have just a few default colors for shells. So if it's easier for you that way, which is $5 each versus if you find another source, you can get it for cheaper. But it's an option, especially if you're just making a few of them for yourself or whatever. It's not a commercial for I don't get paid for it. It's literally what I use. So having to support them. Or the other thing you can do, which I did it for a long time, is if you find broken Nintendo games or whatever, you can use a blow dryer. I have a heat gun too, but just something that melts the glue from the label. You can just peel off the label and put a new one on there. But you're also using an old shell that I have. Scratches, scruff marks, coffee stains. I don't know. People use it as a coaster, I guess. I don't know.
Do that to a school game then.
Yeah. Try that. Go for it.
Can you give a preview of some of the upcoming games that are going to come out?
I should. It took the drive coming here, which was about. It was a 3-hour drive. It took the drive coming here for me to realize, what? I knew I was going to talk about this today. I should have brought one of my little mini PCs or something that had the next 2 games on there. Both of them, at least on my end, are done. And it was another one of those. And this is, again, coming back to the, it takes a team of people. There's a homebrew called Tapeworm. They also do Flea. It's low-tech games. Him and I are working on our next game. Is called, it's a puzzle game, 100 levels, where, anyone, Choo Choo Rocket, sound familiar, anyone? I love Choo Choo Rocket, and him and I were talking just it was at Midwest Gaming Classic, I think, where we were just, I was like, oh man, I have this idea for this game, where I would love to make, just like I wanted to make a game where you have a gelatinous cube, I wanted to make a game where you kind of feed knights into a treasure chest mimic. And every stage was that, where every stage was Indiana Jones style. You have to go through and maybe push blocks into a wall, whatever. I was thinking Quirk in my head for the Game Boy, where it's you have to go through and find all these things to get to the treasure chest, and oh no, it's a mimic, you get eaten. Stage 2, and it's just the same thing over. And I just thought it would be hilarious. And then he kind of said, "Oh, you mean Choo Choo Rocket?" I was like, "Ooh, even better, yes." And then oh my god, I love puns. Thank you. I love puns. So, inspired by Choo Choo Rocket, you're guiding these knights into a hungry treasure chest. So you have, same like Choo Choo Rocket, you have the arrows where you just, you put the arrows on the floor, there might be a spring to jump over holes. Different knights have different personalities, so it kind of mixes up gameplay a little bit. To feed these knights into a hungry mimic. And the game is called Choo Choo Mimic, because the mimic is chewing the knights. So it's the best thing ever. The game is done as far as I know, but we're just in the final testing. I was hoping it would be ready by this weekend. But it'll also be available online. It'll be available for future conventions as well. And just like with this, planning on putting out a Dreamcast. The Wave Studios, I was already aware, so I'll have it on Dreamcast. It will, put it to Switch, put it to Steam. And that's the other thing too, is Megacat Studios also does their 8-bit evolution? No, 8-bit something. Where they can also handle those projects and put them on, even put them on Xbox and PlayStation. The reason why Beavis isn't on Xbox and PlayStation is to release a game on those consoles. It requires achievements and trophies, and that's one thing we haven't quite learned how to code yet. But Steam is always cool. Steam's load it up, and Switch as well. Which is why when you look at Switch every week, there's oh cool, a new clock game. There's so many apps that are on Switch. It's insane. But I have that game coming out for NES, and then for that one, I did some of the graphics as well as level design. So him and I, what started out as hey, can I pay you to code this game? And I'll pay you to code this game, and then I'll take all the graphics, and I can do level design too. And there is whenever I think of level design, or maybe if you think of coding Nintendo games, you think it's just line of code after code after code, like Commodore 64 style. But there's all these programs that everyone uses, so it's a graphical interface. So for it's almost like playing Sim City, creating these stages where it's like, okay, I'm gonna put this here. Oh, I can't beat my own stage. Okay, but if I put this thing here and then maybe move this over here, I get to the point where I can beat it. I was like, okay, cool. Well, if I can beat it, someone else can. It's like Mario Maker. So on the back end, it plays a lot like, for me, it was fun just making these stages for that game. And it was a program called Tiled, I think, that had where you just kind of, and Nest Maker's the same way, where you just put the pieces in place and then it's like, oh, congratulations, you just made a new level. And then my next game for the Sega Genesis, which again, is probably ready. I just have to play test it myself to go through all the stages, and then I'll be ready. The Sega Genesis, Mega Drive, this one, I don't know, it was just one of those, not that I'm practicing currently, but I grew up in the LDS church, the Mormon church, and the idea of impressing the ladies by carrying stacks of chairs after the meeting to where they're supposed to go, I thought was, just for some reason, I was like, I'd love to make a game like that. So I have a game called Stack and Attract coming out soon, where you have to build up your attraction meter by the more chairs you carry, the slower you move, so you're more apt to run into obstacles. And if you actually hit something and there's crawling babies and there's other people in the way, and stuff like that. So if you trip over something, you drop your chairs, you have to go pick them up again and put them where they're supposed to go. And I think the game's great, but it's it's more of that kind of tongue-in-cheek where it's like, oh, I never thought about that. That might be the funniest thing ever. And there's a couple of videos on my channel or my social medias that have been working on this game for the last while. And not that it takes place in a Mormon church, but if you look at the pictures on the wall, there's red robe Jesus knocking on the door. There's some of the stages, some of them just take place in the conference room, but then some of the stages take place on a high school basketball, like a basketball court. Just because I remember having a lot of meetings just in the middle of the basketball court for some reason. So it's just one of those kind of generically speaking, I just thought it'd be hilarious. It should be coming out soon. Yeah, 10% tithing. All right. One more question. If anyone has anything else, go for it.
You said you did the playtesting QA yourself.
Correct.
Is there any concern for you? Did you at any point feel like you should also outsource that and then share your play with the new
No, and people are doing that too. A couple of my friends who also happen to have YouTube channels and who have done that before. Yes, if it was just me by myself, well, it's I wrote a breakfast. I have it over there too. I wrote a book about breakfast cereal in the 80s and 90s. So since I wrote my own words, I'm not even reading my own words. I already know what I'm going to say. So I skip over all the spelling errors, all the editing mistakes. It's not until I have it printed and I'm looking at it where it's how did I skip all these? I see all these spelling errors. And same idea where it's well, if I already know how to beat all these levels, then of course I'm not going to, crash into any walls or glitch the game or something like that because I already know how to beat them. So yeah, 100%. You can do it all yourself too, but as soon as it's published, that it's too late. So there are other people who are yes, I'm part of that too, just because I want to play through it, just as a fan, and also especially with the Mimic game, I only created half the levels, so I still have to play the other guy's levels too, and he's playing my levels too, and then we have a couple more people who are also going through the game, and which is funny with the QA too. It's you're literally trying to break the game. We used to have a paranormal investigator friend who, his philosophy was we're not trying to look for ghosts, we're just proving that they don't exist. But if they exist, they exist. But we're eliminating all doubt. So that's what we're trying to do with these, with these games. That's usually what it comes down to. It's a whole lot of trial and error. Which is sometimes when games are released, it's like movies. An actor acts in a movie and the movie doesn't come out for 3 years. It's there's some of these games. They've been worked on for so long, but it's they're finally released after, people have talked about them for, 4 years ago or something like that. So, and with that, that's my time. Thank you so much.
Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and to the right are a few more videos from the Portland Retro Gaming Expo 2023. Thanks for watching.